The neon sign flickered above the rainy dusk diner, casting erratic shadows across the cracked asphalt parking lot. It was just past midnight in the dusty outskirts of a forgotten Nevada town, where the highway stretched like a vein of forgotten dreams under a starless sky. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of burnt coffee and grease, the kind that clung to your clothes like regret. Emily Harlan wiped down the counter for the third time that shift, her hands raw from the endless cycle of plates and apologies. At 32, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned to fade into the background, her dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail that spoke of mornings too rushed for mirrors. The bell above the door jingled sharply, cutting through the low hum of the ancient jukebox, playing some faded country tune about lost love. A group of truckers lumbered in, their boots thudding against the linoleum like judgments. They were the usual late-night crowd, rough around the edges, voices loud with the bravado of men who'd seen too many miles and not enough mercy. Emily plastered on her smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes, and poured their coffees black, just how they liked it. "Refills on the house," she murmured, dodging a wandering hand from one of them as she set down the mugs. The laughter that followed was coarse, echoing off the Formica walls, but she swallowed it down, her fingers tightening around the order pad. This was her life now, serving strangers who saw her as just another fixture in the dim light, a ghost pouring dreams into chipped ceramic. She'd come to this place 5 years ago, after the world had cracked open beneath her. Back then, Emily had been someone else, a girl with fire in her veins, riding shotgun on endless desert roads, chasing horizons that promised freedom. But promises had a way of turning to ash, a betrayal, a night of shattering glass and sirens, and suddenly she was alone, nursing scars that no one could see. The ring, a simple silver band etched with a faded promise, still hung on a chain around her neck, hidden beneath her uniform. She told herself it was just metal, a relic from a life she'd buried. But some nights, when the diner emptied and the wind howled outside, she touched it like a talisman against the emptiness. The door swung open again, letting in a gust of cool desert air laced with the faint tang of exhaust. This time, it wasn't truckers. A lone figure stepped inside, his silhouette broad and unyielding against the headlights of a rumbling Harley that idled just beyond the window. He was tall, weathered by sun and road, his leather vest patched with symbols that whispered of outlaw brotherhoods. The Iron Vipers, a name that still sent ripples through small towns like this one. His boots echoed with purpose as he approached the counter, the faint creak of leather punctuating each step. Emily's heart stuttered, but she kept her gaze down, busying herself with a rag. Strangers were all the same here. Best not to look too long. "Coffee, black," he said, his voice a low gravel that cut through the diner's haze like a knife. She nodded, pouring without meeting his eyes, the steam rising like a veil between them. He slid onto a stool, the wood groaning under his weight, and for a moment the world narrowed to the space between the counter and his gloved hands. The truckers quieted, sensing the shift in the air, their jokes dying on uneasy lips. Emily set the mug down, her fingers brushing the edge, and that's when he looked up. His eyes, storm grey, etched with lines that spoke of battles fought in shadows, locked onto hers, time fractured, the diner's fluorescent buzz fading to a distant hum. "Emily," he murmured, the name slipping out like a secret unearthed. She froze, the rag slipping from her grasp, her breath catching in her throat. It had been 7 years since she'd heard that timbre, since those eyes had been the anchor in her storm-tossed world. Ryan Caldwell, the man who'd once been her everything, the outlaw biker who'd sworn an oath under a blood moon, promising to shield her from the darkness that hunted them both, the one who'd vanished after that fateful night, leaving her to piece together the fragments alone. Whispers had followed her, the Vipers scattered, a rival crew's ambush, bodies unaccounted for in the canyons. She'd mourned him in silence, convinced the road had claimed him like so many others. He leaned forward, the faint scent of leather and engine oil wafting across the counter, pulling her back to dusty sunsets and whispered vows. "Do you still wear my ring?" The question hung there, soft yet seismic, unraveling the careful walls she'd built. Emily's hand instinctively went to her neck, fingers closing around the hidden chain. The truckers shifted uncomfortably, but the diner felt miles away now, the world reduced to this scarred stranger and the ghost of what they'd lost. Tears pricked her eyes unbidden as memories flooded in. The roar of engines at dawn, his calloused hand in hers, the promise etched in silver, "Till the road's end, we're bound." She'd kept it even when doubt clawed at her, even when life ground her down to this endless shift. I thought you were gone," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the jukebox's mournful twang. Ryan's jaw tightened, a flicker of pain crossing his features, shadowed by the brim of his weathered hat. "I was, for a while. But promises don't die easy, Em. Not ours." He glanced toward the window, where his bike gleamed under the neon glow, a sentinel waiting. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the distant rumble of more engines, approaching, like echoes of a forgotten legion. Emily's pulse raced. The past wasn't buried after all. It had just been waiting, revving in the shadows, ready to pull her back into the fray. The first trucker cleared his throat, breaking the spell, but Ryan's gaze never left her. "We need to talk about what happened that night, about the crew, and the ones who took everything." His words carried the weight of unfinished justice, of loyalties tested by fire. Emily nodded slowly, the ring burning against her skin like a brand. For the first time in years, the diner didn't feel like a cage. It felt like the starting line of a ride she never thought she'd take again. As the additional bikes growled into the lot, their headlights slicing the night like accusations, Emily realized the question wasn't just about the ring. It was about reclaiming the honor they'd sworn to uphold, the moral code that had bound the Vipers. A chosen family forged in the crucible of the road. Ryan extended a hand across the counter, scarred and steady. "Ride with me, Em. One last promise to keep." The air thickened with possibility, the scent of gasoline mingling with the coffee's bitterness as the first drops of rain pattered against the window. She hesitated, the weight of 7 lost years pressing down, but in his eyes she saw the redemption she'd long abandoned. The door jingled again, and the night unfolded, pulling them toward a horizon laced with danger and unbreakable bonds. The rain began in earnest. As Emily stepped out from behind the counter, the diner's fluorescent lights casting long shadows that danced like uneasy specters across the worn linoleum. Her uniform clung slightly to her skin from the humid night air seeping through the cracks, but it was Ryan's presence that made her feel exposed, as if the years of careful hiding had peeled away in an instant. The truckers exchanged glances, their half-eaten plates forgotten, but none dared interrupt the charged silence. Outside, the growl of engines swelled into a symphony of thunder, headlights piercing the downpour like searchlights in a storm-tossed sea. Emily's hand trembled as she untied her apron, folding it neatly on the stool, a small act of surrender to the pull of the past. Ryan stood, his broad frame blocking the window's view of the arriving convoy. Water beaded on his leather vest, tracing paths down the faded patches that told stories of rides through canyons and skirmishes under starlit skies. The Iron Viper's emblem, a coiled serpent with eyes like embers, gleamed dully, a reminder of the brotherhood that had once been her shield and her storm. "They're here for you, Em," he said, his voice steady amid the rising patter of rain. "The ones who made it. We scattered after that night, but the promise held us, like it held you." His eyes flicked to the chain at her neck, where the silver ring dangled, a quiet accusation and affirmation all at once. She followed him to the door, the bells jingle a final farewell to the life she'd carved in this roadside limbo. The parking lot had transformed into a battlefield of chrome and resolve. 24 bikes now ringed the diner, their riders dismounting with the disciplined grace of men who'd faced worse than a desert squall. Faces she half remembered emerged from the shadows. Scarred cheeks, tattooed arms, eyes hardened by loss but softened by loyalty. There was Marcus, the quiet mechanic who'd patched more than engines, his wrench-calloused hands now gripping a helmet like a lifeline. Beside him, Lena, the only woman in the core crew back then, her ponytail slick with rain. A faint scar tracing her jaw from a long-ago brawl that had tested their bonds. They nodded to Emily, not with surprise, but with the quiet recognition of family reunited. The air smelled of wet asphalt and revving exhaust, the kind that promised motion and escape. Ryan led her to his Harley, the beast of a machine purring under his touch as he handed her a spare helmet. Hers, from years ago, its leather strap still bearing the faint imprint of her grip. "I kept it," he admitted, his breath warm against the chill. "Figured one day you'd need it again." Emily slipped it on, the familiar weight grounding her as she swung her leg over the seat behind him. Her arms wrapped around his waist instinctively, the solid wall of his back a bridge to memories she'd locked away. Sun-baked afternoons racing toward sunsets, his laughter cutting through the wind, the vow they'd made under a canopy of Joshua trees. No matter the miles, no matter the fight, we're each other's road home. The convoy formed up without a word, a rolling phalanx that cut through the rain-slicked highway like a vein of defiant light. Emily pressed her face against Ryan's shoulder, the vibration of the engine rumbling through her bones, awakening a fire she'd thought extinguished. They rode for what felt like hours, but was mere miles, veering off the main road onto a dirt path that wound into the shadowed hills. The diner faded in the mirrors, its neon glow swallowed by the night, and with it the weight of serving endless coffees to faceless strangers. Here, in the roar of the pack, she felt alive again, part of something greater than survival, a chosen kin bound by oaths that outlasted betrayal. They pulled into an abandoned ranch house on the outskirts, its weathered boards groaning under the assault of the storm. Flashlights bobbed as the crew dismounted, forming a loose circle around a crackling fire pit that Marcus had ignited with practiced ease. The flames cast flickering portraits on their faces, illuminating the wear of the road, faint limps, guarded postures, eyes that scanned the darkness for threats. Lena pressed a steaming mug of something strong into Emily's hands. Black coffee laced with a hint of whiskey, the aroma cutting through the damp earthiness. "You look like you need this," she said, her voice rough but kind, a sister's tone that bridged the years. Emily nodded, sipping as the warmth spread, thawing the ice around her heart. Ryan pulled her aside, into the shelter of the porch where the rain drummed a relentless rhythm on the tin roof. "That night, the ambush," he began, his words measured, each one weighted like gravel under tires. "The shadow hounds hit us hard. They weren't just rivals, they had badges in their pockets, corrupt law from the county line down. We lost good men, bodies scattered in the dust, traces of struggle that the official reports buried under lies." He paused, his jaw clenching, the firelight etching deeper lines into his face. "I thought you were gone too. Pulled you from the wreck, but the smoke. I couldn't find you after. Hid out, rebuilt what I could of the Vipers. But the ring, it was our signal. If you still wore it, you'd know I was coming back." Emily's fingers traced the silver band, now slipped onto her finger, cool against her skin. The confession stirred the embers of old pain, the crash, the confusion, waking in a haze with echoes of shouts and the acrid bite of burning rubber. She'd fled, convinced the Vipers were ghosts, the law's corruption a noose tightening around any who remembered. "I waited," she whispered, rain mingling with tears on her cheeks. Searched the papers, the whispers in truck stops, thought honor died with them. Ryan's hand covered hers, callous as rough as the truth. "It didn't. We're here to make it right, Not with guns, but with the code we swore. Expose the rot, protect the innocent they trampled. The hounds are still out there, preying on the weak, twisting justice into chains. From the fire, voices rose in low murmurs, the crew sharing fragments of the lost years. A brother avenged in quiet ways, a promise kept to a widow left behind. Lena caught Emily's eye, a silent vow passing between them. Women of the road, guardians of the fragile. The storm raged on, but inside the circle, a moral fire burned brighter, fueled by redemption's unyielding pull. Ryan squeezed her hand. This ride isn't just revenge, Em. It's reclaiming what they stole. Our family, our word. You in? The question hung like the rain's pause, the horizon calling with the promise of dawn's light breaking through the clouds. Emily met his gaze, the ring glinting like a beacon. For the first time, the road ahead felt like home, laced with the quiet strength of loyalties reborn. The fire crackled in the pit, spitting embers into the night like defiant stars against the relentless downpour. Emily stood on the porch's edge, the rain's rhythm a steady drumbeat echoing the pulse in her veins. Ryan's question lingered in the air between them, heavy as the storm clouds that choked the sky. She looked out at the gathered vipers, their silhouettes blurred by the haze of mist and memory. Hardened souls who'd clawed their way back from the brink, bound not by blood, but by the unbreakable thread of shared oaths. The scent of damp wood and smouldering pine, mingled with the faint metallic tang of gun oil from holsters, kept more for show than intent, a reminder that their fight was one of truth, not bullets. "I'm in," Emily said finally, her voice cutting through the gale with a clarity that surprised even her. The words felt like shedding a skin too tight for too long, the silver ring on her finger catching the firelight as she extended her hand to Ryan. He clasped it firmly, his grip a vow renewed, calluses speaking of roads traveled alone. For a moment, the world narrowed to that connection, the warmth of his palm against the chill, the distant rumble of thunder mirroring the resolve building in her chest. No more hiding behind counters and forced smiles. This was the call she'd buried under years of quiet survival, the promise pulling her back to the fray. Inside the ranch house, the crew had claimed the main room, its sagging floorboards groaning under boots worn thin by miles. Lanterns hung from exposed beams, casting a golden glow that softened the edges of peeling wallpaper and dust-shrouded furniture. Marcus hunched over a scarred oak table, unrolling a faded map of the county's back roads, his thick fingers tracing lines like veins leading to a poisoned heart. Lena leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her eyes sharp as she scanned the group, about 15 strong now, each face a map of losses, a missing brother, a shattered trust, echoes of that ambush night when the Shadowhounds had struck with the complicity of badges turned black. The air hummed with low voices, the clink of tin mugs passing hands, the sharp inhale of cigarettes lit against the gloom. Ryan guided Emily through the door, the hinges creaking like an old confession. Heads turned, nods rippling through the room like a wave of silent welcome. "She's back," Ryan announced simply. No fanfare, just the truth laid bare. Marcus looked up, his weathered face cracking into a rare grin, the kind earned from patching souls as much as machines. "Knew it. The ring's our compass, always has been." He slid a chair toward her with his boot, the scrape echoing her decision. Emily sat, the wood cool against her legs, and accepted a mug from Lena. More of that spiked coffee, its steam curling like secrets unveiled. They gathered closer, the map becoming a battlefield of ink and intent. Ryan pointed to a cluster of dots marking the Shadowhounds' strongholds, hidden garages, turned fronts for smuggling, sheriff's outposts laced with graft. "They didn't just hit us that night," he said, his voice gravel low, drawing the group in. "They preyed on the vulnerable. Folks like old man Harlan down by the river lost his land to their evictions. whispers of aggression that the law swept under, or the kids in the trailer parks, families torn by false arrests. It's a web, Em. Corruption rotting from the inside, twisting justice into a noose for anyone who stands tall. Emily's breath caught at the mention of Harlan. Her uncle, gone 3 years now, his farm foreclosed under suspicious claims. The scene at his doorstep suggesting a struggle buried in paperwork. She chalked it up to hard times, but now it clicked, a piece of the puzzle she'd ignored in her isolation. Her fingers tightened around the mug, the heat seeping into her bones as memories surfaced. Ryan's voice in the dark, vowing to protect the innocent. The Viper's code etched not in leather but in actions, escorting widows through hostile towns, standing sentinel for the forgotten. "What do we do?" she asked, her tone steady, eyes meeting each face in turn. Lena stepped forward, her scar catching the light like a badge of survival. "We expose it. Quiet rides to gather proof, witnesses, ledgers, the kind of truth that shines brighter than any lie. No storming gates, we let the light do the work." The plan unfolded in murmurs and nods, a tapestry of moral strategy woven from hard-won wisdom. Marcus sketched routes on the map, avoiding patrols with the precision of a man who'd evaded worse. Another rider, a lanky veteran named Jacob with tattoos fading like old promises, shared a tale from the fringes. A nurse at the local clinic who'd seen patients turned away, favors demanded by those in uniform. "She kept records," he said, voice hushed. "Signs of coercion, nothing more, but enough to crack their facade." Emily listened, the fire's warmth battling the chill of revelation. This wasn't vengeance, it was redemption, a quiet uprising against the shadows that had stolen their family and scattered their honor. As the night deepened, the storm easing to a drizzle that tapped the roof like impatient fingers, Ryan pulled Emily aside to a shadowed corner. The room's glow faded behind them, leaving only the faint outline of his face, etched with the weight of command. "This could pull us under again," he warned, his hand brushing her arm, a touch both tender and urgent. "The hounds have eyes everywhere, deputies on payroll, informants in the wind. But with you here, it's whole. Our promise, complete." She leaned into him, the scent of rain-soaked leather grounding her, the ring a steady pulse against her skin. "We've lost enough to fear," she replied, her words a bridge across the years. "Let's give back what they took, the trust, the loyalty, the road we built together." From the main room, Lena's voice called them back, the crew rising like a tide ready to turn. They stepped out into the clearing night, the air crisp with the promise of stars breaking through. Bikes lined up in the mud, engines coughing to life with throaty roars that shook the ground. Emily mounted behind Ryan once more, the helmet's visor framing a world reborn in motion. As the convoy peeled away, headlights carving paths through the lingering mist, she felt the pull of destiny. Not a cage, but a horizon, wide and waiting. The ride ahead was laced with peril, but in the Brotherhood's rumble, justice felt not like a distant dream, but a fire kindled close, burning toward dawn's unyielding light. The first rays of dawn crept over the jagged hills like hesitant fingers, painting the desert in hues of bruised purple and hesitant gold. The convoy had pushed through the night, engines humming a relentless dirge that drowned out the fading patter of rain. Emily clung to Ryan's back, the wind whipping through her hair beneath the helmet's edge, carrying the sharp bite of sagebrush and cooling earth. Miles blurred into a tapestry of shadowed canyons and forgotten arroyos, the bikes slicing through the mist like arrows loosed from a bow of resolve. Her body ached from the ride, but it was a welcome burn, the kind that reminded her she was alive, unbound from the diner's fluorescent cage. They veered off the dirt path onto a narrow trail leading to an overlook, a vantage point etched into Viper lore as a sanctuary for planning under open skies. The engines cut one by one, the sudden silence amplifying the distant call of a lone coyote, its howl a mournful echo of the wild heart they all carried. Ryan dismounted first, offering Emily a hand that she took without hesitation, her boots sinking into the soft, dew-kissed soil. The crew fanned out, securing the perimeter with quiet efficiency. Marcus checking the bikes, Lena scanning the horizon through binoculars that caught the emerging light. Jacob lingered by his ride, fiddling with a chain that dangled from his vest, its links whispering of oaths renewed. Emily stepped to the edge, the vast expanse below unfolding like a map of hidden sins. The sleepy town of Eldridge sprawled in the valley, its main street lined with facades that hid darker dealings. Smoke curled from chimneys, early risers stirring, oblivious to the web tightening around them. Ryan joined her, his shoulder brushing hers, the warmth of him a steady anchor against the chill morning air. "This is where we start," he said, his voice low, threaded with the gravel of exhaustion and determination. "The clinic Jacob mentioned, it's down there, in the heart of their grip. The nurse, Clara, she's got ledgers that could unravel it all. Signs of favors traded for silence, families pressured into the shadows." She nodded, the silver ring glinting as she adjusted her jacket, its weight a talisman against doubt. Memories flickered. That same overlook years ago, the Vipers gathered under a blanket of stars, Ryan's arm around her as they plotted routes to aid the overlooked, delivering supplies to isolated ranches, standing watch over evictions that smelled of foul play. The ambush had shattered that fragile peace, scattering them like ash on the wind. Now, piecing it back felt like mending a torn road, stitch by stitch. "What if she's scared off?" Emily asked, her gaze fixed on the town below, where a patrol car glinted on the outskirts, its lights a predatory flash. "The hounds don't let loose ends dangle." Ryan's jaw tightened, the lines around his eyes deepening in the dawn's unforgiving light. "Then we show her we're not the monsters they paint us as. Our code's about protection, Em, not the boot on necks, but the hand that lifts." He turned to the group, signaling them closer. They formed a loose semicircle on the rocky outcrop, the map from the ranch now spread on a flat stone, weighted by pebbles that clattered like uneasy dice. Lena traced a finger along the route to the clinic, her nail chipped from years of gripping handlebars. "We go in pairs, quiet, no rumble, blend like ghosts. Jacob and I take the back entrance, you two, the front. Marcus stays with the bikes, eyes sharp." The plan settled over them like a shared breath, laced with the undercurrent of risk. Emily felt the pull of it, the ethical tightrope they walked, exposing corruption without becoming the chaos it bred. As a soft wind stirred the dust at their feet, carrying the faint, acrid scent of distant wildfires, Jacob spoke up, his voice rough from the night smoke. "I lost my sister to their games," he admitted, eyes distant fixed on the horizon. "Trailer park raid, whispers of resistance, and suddenly she's gone. The place showing marks of a fight hushed up. Clara helped bury the truth back then. If we bring it out, it's for her, too." The confession hung in the air, binding them tighter, a thread of personal redemption woven into the larger tapestry. Emily's hand found Ryan's, squeezing once, a silent vow amid the crew's nods. They mounted up again, the engines roaring to life with a throaty defiance that echoed off the canyon walls. The descent into Eldridge was a controlled plunge, bikes weaving through switchbacks where scrub brush clawed at the tires. Emily's heart pounded in rhythm with the pistons, the town growing larger, its secrets sharpening into focus. Streetlights flickered off as the sun crested fully, bathing the clappered buildings in a deceptive warmth. They split at the edge of town, Ryan and Emily peeling off toward the clinic, a squat brick building on the corner. Its sign faded to Eldridge Health Center, windows shuttered against prying eyes. He parked in the alley, the Harley's kickstand scraping gravel like a whispered warning. "Stay close," Ryan murmured, removing his helmet. his hair tousled by the wind, eyes scanning the empty lot. Emily nodded, slipping the ring into her pocket for safekeeping, its chain now a bracelet against her wrist. They approached the side door, the air thick with the sterile tang of antiseptic mingling with the morning dew. Inside, the waiting room was dim, empty chairs like silent witnesses. A bell tinkled as they entered, drawing a figure from the back. Clara, mid-40s, her uniform crisp, but her face etched with the weariness of guarded truths. Her eyes widened at Ryan's vest, but softened when Emily stepped forward, her voice gentle. "We're not here to cause trouble. We're the ones who remember what the badges forget." Clara hesitated, glancing at the clock ticking like a countdown, then led them to a cramped office, shelves lined with files that smelled of dust and desperation. Words flowed in hushed tones, tales of patients coerced, lands seized under false pretenses, the Shadowhound's influence seeping like ink into the town's veins. Clara slid a folder across the desk, its pages yellowed, detailing entries of unexplained absences and settled disputes that reeked of cover-ups. "This could end me," she whispered, her hands trembling. Ryan leaned in, his presence steady. "It'll save more than it breaks. Honor like yours. It's the light they fear." Emily added her touch, a hand on Clara's arm, the warmth of shared vulnerability bridging the gap. Outside, an engine revved faintly. Lena and Jacob signal received, but as they gathered the documents, a shadow fell across the window, a sheriff's cruiser pulling up, its occupant stepping out with deliberate slowness, badge catching the sun like a false promise. Ryan's hand went to Emily's back, guiding her toward the rear exit, the folder tucked under her jacket. The air thickened with tension, the moral line blurring as footsteps echoed in the hall. They slipped out into the alley, just as the door creaked open behind them, hearts racing in the sudden glare of midday. The convoy reformed on the outskirts, documents secured. But the chase's whisper lingered, a reminder that Justice's road was paved with shadows, yet to flee. If you're feeling the pull of this ride, hit that like button below. Let's keep the fire burning for stories like this. The midday sun beat down on Eldridge like a relentless interrogator, turning the asphalt into a shimmering haze that distorted the edges of reality. Emily's boots pounded the alley gravel, the folder clutched tight against her chest, its edges digging into her ribs like a secret too heavy to hold. Ryan's hand gripped hers, pulling her toward the mouth of the narrow lane where their bike waited, concealed behind a rusted dumpster that reeked of stale oil and forgotten trash. Behind them, the clinic door swung shut with a muffled thud, but the footsteps, deliberate, echoing off the brick walls, grew louder, a predator's prowl in the quiet town square. "Keep low," Ryan whispered, his breath hot against her ear as they ducked around the corner. The sheriff's cruiser idled at the curb, its engine a low growl that vibrated through the ground, headlights off but presence unmistakable. The deputy, broad-shouldered, badge glinting like a counterfeit coin, scanned the lot, his hand resting on the radio at his belt, eyes narrowing against the glare. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears, the silver ring on her wrist a cool reminder of why they ran. Not from fear, but toward the truth that could shatter the hound's grip. The documents burned against her skin, pages of coerced silences, lands stripped under veiled threats, families fractured by whispers of aggression that the law had buried deep. They reached the Harley in a crouch, Ryan swinging his leg over the seat with the fluid grace of a man who'd evaded worse hunts. Emily mounted behind him, her arms locking around his waist, the familiar solidity of his frame a lifeline in the storm of adrenaline. The engine caught with a throaty cough, muffled by Ryan's quick twist of the throttle, but it was enough. The deputy's head snapped toward the sound, boots scraping as he bolted for the cruiser. Tires screeched in pursuit as Ryan gunned it, the bike leaping forward like a coiled serpent unleashed, weaving through the alley's tight confines. Dust kicked up in choking clouds, the scent of scorched rubber mingling with the dry bite of desert air. The convoy reformed on the ragged outskirts, bikes materializing from side streets like ghosts summoned by the roar. Lena and Jacob peeled in from a parallel road, their saddlebags heavier with pilfered files from the clinic's back office, more ledgers, faded receipts that painted a picture of graft woven into the town's fabric. Marcus brought up the rear, his old Indian rumbling like thunder, eyes flicking to the mirrors where the cruiser's lights flashed blue and red, a siren wailing its impotent rage. "Split the pack!" Ryan shouted over the wind, his voice cutting through the mechanical symphony. The group fractured into pairs, veering onto diverging trails that snaked through the scrubland, arroyos choked with mesquite, hills dotted with boulders that offered fleeting cover. Emily pressed closer to Ryan, the vibration of the bike jarring her teeth, her mind racing faster than the engine. Clara's face lingered in her thoughts, the nurse's trembling hands, the quiet courage in her eyes as she handed over the proof. "They'll come for her," Emily murmured, the words torn away by the gale. Ryan nodded, jaw set like iron. "That's why we ride smart. Get this to safe ground. Let the light expose it. No blood on our hands, just the truth they can't bury." The road twisted ahead, a ribbon of cracked earth flanked by Joshua trees that clawed at the sky, their twisted limbs casting erratic shadows that danced like uneasy allies. The chase stretched into the afternoon, the sun climbing to its zenith, baking the land into a furnace of gold and grit. The deputy fell back after a mile, radio crackling with calls for backup, but the hound's network was vast. Distant sirens joined the fray, a chorus of corruption echoing across the valley. The Vipers pushed on, engines straining as they crested a ridge overlooking a dry riverbed, its banks scarred by flash floods long past. There, in the shadow of a monolithic outcrop, they regrouped, bikes forming a defensive circle amid the boulders. Lena dismounted first, her face streaked with sweat and dust, but her grin fierce as she unzipped her bag. Got the heart of it, names, dates, the sheriff's own signature on deals that stink of shadows. Jacob leaned against his bike, catching his breath, the chain on his vest glinting as he pulled a waterskin from his pack. The group huddled close, the air thick with the tang of overheated metal and parched earth. Emily spread the folders on a flat rock, pages fluttering like captured breaths in the hot breeze. Entries blurred before her eyes. A rancher named Elias, evicted under claims of unpaid debts that traced back to hound enforcers. A mother at the trailer park, her home raided on flimsy suspicions. Traces of unrest swept aside in reports that rang hollow. It was a litany of quiet injustices, the kind that eroded souls over time, much like the riverbed below, worn smooth by relentless flow. Ryan knelt beside her, his finger tracing a line to the core, a ledger linking the hounds to higher strings. Deputies paid to look away while the crew preyed on the vulnerable. "This is the promise we broke," he said, voice low, eyes meeting hers with the weight of shared scars. "That night in the canyon, we swore to shield the overlooked, lost sight in the scatter, but now we mend it." Emily nodded, the ring's chain brushing her skin, a tether to the oaths that had survived the years. Lena joined them, her scar pulling tight as she smiled faintly. "Clara's not alone anymore. We get this out, quiet channels, folks who listen without badges blinding them. Let the moral weight crush the lies." But the respite shattered as engines crested the ridge behind them. 3 cruisers now, dust plumes rising like accusations, closing the gap with mechanical precision. Marcus revved his Indian, signaling the breakout. Ride or regret. The crew mounted in a surge, bikes kicking up gravel as they plunged into the riverbed, wheels churning through sand that sucked at the tires like desperate hands. Emily's grip tightened, the world narrowing to the rhythm of the ride, the roar, the heat, the unyielding pull of loyalty that bound them. Bullets weren't their answer. Evasion was, a dance of shadows against the light they carried. They burst from the riverbed onto a hidden trail, the cruisers bogging in the soft earth, their pursuit faltering in the unforgiving terrain. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of fiery orange as the Vipers pushed toward a forgotten outpost on the county line, a neutral ground where old allies waited, printers humming with the promise of copies that could ignite change. Emily felt the shift in Ryan's posture, the subtle ease as distance grew. "We're close," he called back, the wind carrying hope. Yet in the fading light, doubt flickered. The hounds wouldn't yield easily, their corruption a hydra with heads in every shadow. But with the crew's fire at her back, the document's truth in her hands, Emily rode into the twilight. Redemption's road, unfolding like a vow etched in the dust. The twilight deepened into a velvet shroud as the convoy crested the final ridge, the outpost emerging like a sentinel from the encroaching dusk. A weathered silo barn on the frayed edge of the county line, its corrugated walls etched with the patina of forgotten harvests. The air cooled rapidly, carrying the crisp bite of creosote bushes and the faint earthy musk of irrigation ditches long dry. Emily's arms ached from the hours of clinging to Ryan, but the documents pressed against her side like a heartbeat, pulsing with the potential to rewrite the shadows that had haunted them. The bike slowed to a rumble, headlights cutting swaths through the gloom, illuminating the gravel lot where a lone figure waited. Thomas, an old Viper ally turned printer in exile, his frame silhouetted against the open barn door, floodlights spilling warm amber onto the ground. Engines cut one by one, the sudden hush amplifying the distant yips of jackrabbits and the soft sigh of wind through the scrub. Ryan dismounted, his boots crunching gravel as he helped Emily down, her legs unsteady but her resolve ironclad. The crew gathered, faces streaked with the day's grime, eyes gleaming with the quiet fire of purpose. Lena slung her bag over her shoulder, the weight of stolen files shifting inside, while Jacob scanned the horizon, his chain vest catching the light like a ward against the night. Marcus killed the last headlight, plunging the lot into a pool of lantern glow, the scent of fresh ink already wafting from within, a promise of multiplication, of truths amplified beyond the road's whisper. Thomas greeted them with a nod, his grizzled beard flecked with sawdust, hands calloused from presses that had run more than newsprint. "Heard the rumble miles off," he said. A voice, a low rumble like idling pistons, brought the gear, enough to flood every diner, every truck stop from here to the state line. He led them inside, the barn's interior a makeshift war room, long tables laden with copiers humming softly, stacks of blank paper waiting like blank slates for confession. The air hummed with the ozone tang of machinery, mingling with the faint, comforting aroma of strong coffee brewing in a battered percolator. Emily spread the folders on the central table, pages fanning out under the harsh bulbs. Names linked to bribes, evictions masked as justice, families scarred by interventions that left traces of unrest without recourse. Ryan leaned over the map of distribution points, his finger tracing routes that snaked through neutral territories. Sympathetic journalists in border towns, community boards untouched by hound influence, even the walls of veterans' halls where stories like theirs found ears. "We don't storm, we illuminate," he said, his tone steady, drawing the group into the circle. Lena sorted the documents with efficient hands, her scar a silver thread in the light. "Start with Eldridge, posters at the clinic, flyers in the trailer parks. Let Clara see her courage echoed back." Jacob added his voice, rough but fervent. "For my sister, for all the quiet losses. This ends the cycle." Emily watched them, the chosen family knitting tighter in the lamplight, their bonds forged not in blood but in the unyielding code of honor, the same that had pulled her from the diner's haze. As the first copies spat from the machines, a staccato rhythm like urgent heartbeats, Thomas fired up a radio scanner, its static crackling with intercepted chatter. Hound frequencies buzzed to life, deputies coordinating sweeps, whispers of a biker threat, escalating to full alert. The cruisers from the riverbed chase had rallied, their web tightening, but the outpost's isolation bought them time, a fragile window framed by the barn's slatted walls. Emily's hand found the silver ring, now back on her finger, its etched promise cool against her skin. "They'll come," she murmured to Ryan, standing close enough to feel the heat radiating from him, the faint scent of leather and sweat, a bridge to their shared past. He turned, his storm-grey eyes locking onto hers, the lines of fatigue softened by something deeper, redemption's quiet glow. "Let them. We've got the light now." His hand covered hers over the ring, thumb tracing the band in a gesture that spoke volumes. The vow under Joshua trees, the nights of engines roaring against the dark, the ambush's fracture mended by this moment. Outside, the sky had fully surrendered to stars, pinpricks of defiance mirroring the crew's resolve. Marcus distributed the first bundles, stacked sheaves tied with twine, each a seed of exposure. Lena and Jacob took the northern routes, their bikes vanishing into the night with muffled roars, while Thomas plotted digital echoes, scans to underground networks, anonymous drops that would ripple outward like stones in a still pond. Hours blurred in the barn's glow, the copiers whine a relentless chorus as the truth multiplied. Emily helped collate, her fingers inked with the weight of revelations. Elias the rancher's foreclosure tied to a hound payoff, the trailer park raid's hushed aftermath, Clara's ledgers unveiling a sheriff's hand in the shadows. No graphic scars detailed, just the moral architecture of corruption, debts fabricated, protections withheld, innocence pressured into silence. As dawn's first blush crept through the cracks, painting the walls in pale rose, Ryan pulled her to the doorway. The desert awakened with a chorus of birds, the air fresh with dew-kissed sage, the horizon a canvas of possibility. "We did it," he said, voice soft against the morning's hush, his arm slipping around her waist. The ring pressed between them, a seal on promises kept. Emily leaned into him, the diner's ghost finally exorcised, replaced by the road's endless call. The vipers emerged transformed, not outlaws in the old sense, but guardians of a fragile justice, their family whole in the light of day. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, the hound's empire cracking under the flood of evidence, but the crew was already scattering seeds, the moral tide turning. In that embrace, under the rising sun's forgiving warmth, Emily felt the redemption settle, like dust after a storm, leaving clarity and strength. The ride wasn't over, it was just beginning, bound by loyalty's unbreaking chain, honor's legacy riding eternal on the wind. Thanks for riding this journey with us. If these tales of promises kept and justice found resonate with you, hit subscribe and join the crew for more stories straight from the heart of the road.